Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Story of a Storyteller, the podcast where I talk to and get to know the story of a storyteller. That I've never said it like that before, and now I feel really stupid.
The story of a storyteller.
Say the podcast name 3 or 4 times. My guest today is, well, you see, here's the thing. How do I introduce you? Because you have 2 names.
Eve is fine. Eve is fine. Eve, who writes under Dixon Reuel.
Dixon Reuel. There we go. So my guest today is Eve, who writes under the name Dixon Reuel. And I'm glad you said it because I just realized I didn't actually check out the pronunciation of the surname, which anyone who listens to this podcast a few times will know that's a running theme. I always forget to check surnames and then I say them wrong.
And from the off tip for indie authors, never pick a pen name that you can't pronounce and that other people can't pronounce. Top tip right there. Bestseller status. Let's go.
Straight into the tips. So before we actually get into the tips, I do want to explore that thing of your name, because you have a real name, Eve, and all that, but you write under Dixon Reuel. So first explain the name Dixon Reuel, and then explain why you write under a pen name, especially because, sorry to cut across you before you even started. Most people started, I know it's a very Irish podcast this evening, folks. Most of the people I know that write under pen names, they hide their real name, but you're quite openly like, hi, my name's Eve. So yeah.
Okay, well, let's start by breaking down Dixon Reuel. So to me, I love Easter eggs in things and I love callbacks and things. So Dixon, if you know a little show called Star Trek Next Generation,
yeah.
Picard used to love to go into the holodeck and become Dixon Hill, PI. So that's where Dixon comes from. And then Reuel is one of the R's in J.R.R. Tolkien. So I was like, I always try to think of like from the reader's perspective. I was a reader and I saw this book and I was like, okay, I don't know about Dixon, but Reuel, that's from J.R.R. Tolkien. Actually, like a real hardcore nerd. I think that might tickle their interest. So that's why I fell on Dixon Reuel.
Very, very good. So why are you so open about your name being Eve? Like, why not just stick to Dixon Reuel?
No, because it's Dixon Reuel. I'm fooling no one. To me, okay, look, it's a gender neutral name, which I think helps when you write SFF, science fiction, fantasy, and horror or paranormal. I think that helps to have the gender neutral name. But to me, there's no point. The name Eve Marie Power actually is the name I've kind of always written from in the beginning. And that's where I got published and won awards for poetry. And that's where I started out as a writer, is poetry. But then when you write about vampires and zombies and post-apocalyptic and that sort of thing, you're like, you can't be lovely Eve Marie Power anymore. No. Dixon Reuel suits that better. It's just a better label to have. And then when I write under Dixon Reuel, you kind of snap into that mindset. Dixon Reuel is a different author in tone, subject matter, genre than Eve Marie Power, the poet.
So what about your poetry? Like how did you get from, poetry to vampires in love with humans surviving a zombie apocalypse? Like
I'm gonna blow your mind, Conor. I'm gonna blow your mind, and I'm glad you're sitting down.
Yeah, I am too.
Poetry, good. Poetry and science fiction fantasy are the exact same thing. They're the exact same thing. They are attempt to communicate with something beyond what we can see. Poetry tries to express the intangible, and SFF tries to manifest that as well. They're actually pretty much the same thing. Just one is just more shorter and perhaps with more rhyming.
And that'd be the novels about vampires and zombies.
Well, Tolkien, yeah. So it's just literally song after song after song.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about growing up? Like what books or stories and poems, I suppose, were important to wee Eve?
So say in terms of books, the book that got me writing and the book that kind of opened my eyes to literature is The Never-Ending Story by MacLeod. And I know most people have seen the film, but I highly, highly recommend reading the book as an adult because it's actually 2 books in one. The first book is the story of Atreyu and Artax and Falcor and all the fantasy elements. And then it switches in the second half, like literally the font changes. And if you have a really fancy version, the text color changes. And it becomes about Bastian, the human who goes into the fantasy world, and how that affects him. And that story alone really opened my eyes to when you go into the fantasy world of your head, that can kind of change you in real life as a person. And I thought that was fascinating. You know, when you're like 12, 13, that like blows your mind. It's like the best thing ever. Even younger, maybe. I think I read that slightly younger. But then one or two other books. The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle. That is also a movie. It's like an animation movie, The Last Unicorn. When I saw that, that blew me away, the art style and everything. And then when you read the book, it's again another one of those books. When you find the book behind the movie, it's always, you know, snobby, but 10 times better, you know, and this one has songs and poems in it as well. And then I'd say a third book that really was like, oh, you can be Irish and do this. You can actually be an Irish author of fantasy weird stuff was Michael Carroll, the children's author. He put out a series and it's called Moonlight. And it's just like about unicorns in Ireland. And I was just like, I remember it was on like the toy show one year. And I remember picking it up in like probably Easton somewhere. And that blew my mind as well. Small little book. And it's like, oh, Irish people can do this. Because no one in my family is, say, creative or a writer or an artist or anything like that. And that was eye-opening. So I think it's the books you kind of see and find, isn't it?
Yeah.
That kind of open your eyes step by step to what's possible. So yeah, they'd be this
easily.
So I was always going to go down the science fiction fantasy path. I think it couldn't be anything else.
Yeah. To be honest, when you started saying Irish children's series, I thought you were going to say the Darren Shan books, Cirque du Freak and all them. No.
They're your ones, are they?
They're my ones. They're the ones that I was just like, wait, he's from Ireland? Because I think I got to there's 12 in the series. And I think I got to book 7 when I found out he was Irish, because the author in those books, for anyone who doesn't know them, named the first character after himself, something I still haven't analyzed or thought about and won't. So like Darren Shan wrote it, but the main character is not even Darren. The main character is Darren Shan, and Darren Shan, the character, is clearly in America just based on small things like there being a subway and all those kind of things, you know. So when I found out he was Irish, I was just like, whoa, what, we can do this? And I think that just shows how important representation is on children's bookshelves, to be exact, you know, to show a wide range. And now Ireland is a lot more multicultural than when you and I were growing up. Like to have multicultural books and stuff like that on the shelf and all that. It just shows how important it is.
Because it was eye-opening to us that someone could be Irish regardless of creed, color, gender, as we say. But now it's like you need to see the nuances in that. It's not good enough anymore for it to be, wow, an Irish person writes SFF. It needs to be, everybody needs to be represented in that.
Yeah, exactly. So then Never Ending Story, Last Unicorn, and all those books, they made you go, oh wow, this is really cool. So at what point did you start putting pen to paper?
When the X-Files came on telly and I discovered the wonderful world of fan fiction. I would watch, I remember the episodes didn't finish till 10 o'clock, and that was late in secondary school. And I remember the next day in class, I would tear out the middle page of your copybook. So it would be like 4 pages, and I'd write fan fiction between classes, and those few minutes before the teacher would come, be like, oh yeah, fan fiction. And I'd even get like stickers, X-Files stickers, and like have them in the margins, because that's how real books are made. I didn't know, but definitely, I mean, I'm a huge lover of fan fiction, and I don't get the snobbery towards it at all. I think it's so freeing just to dip into someone else's universe and use the tools of the narrative landscape that they've set up to express what you want to do with the story and the world. So go fan fiction. I think
I totally agree. And there was a recent enough, as of us recording this, blow up on Twitter and everywhere, it seemed, online, of this kind of pro anti fan fiction kind of debate, and I just thought it was bizarre, because like you said, it's such a great place to cut your teeth as a writer, because I know one of the longest things I wrote for a long time was my attempt to turn the storyline of Final Fantasy VII into a novel, because I loved the story so much. And I had a
Oh,
friend who I was like, you'll love the story, but she hated video games and still does. So I was actually writing it just so
ooh.
she could get into the story.
Oh,
So yeah, like I totally agree. Fan fiction is totally legitimate, and it's it's, I mean, some of the world's best-selling books started out as fan fiction. I didn't say
yeah.
best, I said best-selling.
They're selling. They're
To be
selling.
clear. So you had your start in poetry. You said you won awards, and for anyone outside of Ireland, one award that you became a runner-up in was the Patrick Kavanagh Poetry Award, which is
Yes.
like huge. So well, in my eyes, it is. So
No, yeah, yeah.
what is it about writing poetry particularly that you fell in love with?
I'm like, I'm gonna deliver this caveat. I'm the world's worst poet. And not in terms of like, oh, my art. It's like I actually don't kind of like poetry and poets generally. So
Controversial.
what to me what poetry is, do you know those poems where the line sticks with not just you and I personally, but it kind of the lines that stick in the collective consciousness of people,
I
like
will
those
rise and
big
go again.
lines, and go to Innisfree. That is such a universal, deep thing. And like I still get goosebumps when I hear that, because genuinely that's what we all kind of want to do. The big lines from like Robert Frost, you know, two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood. That's so universal, but yet communicated in such a lyrical, masterful, craftful way with the English language that it can't help but resonate. And that's the poetry I like. I have this terrible joke, and you can totally cut this if you want to.
Oh,
At
I
every
won't.
poet, no, no, every Irish poetry collection has 3 poems. It has "My husband cheated on me," "A child died," and "My mother hates me." Those 3 poems are in every Irish poetry collection, and I wager every American and every Canadian, because those again are universal problems, okay? And they're serious problems, but when you see them time and time again, where's the resonance?
Yeah.
And this isn't going to turn into like some argument for and against poetry, but it's just to warn you. I like Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty,
Ye
and
mighty and despair.
despair.
I love that poem.
Yeah, and those are the lines that make it into TV. Breaking Bad, that was in that episode. Written by Ryan Johnson, by the way, the Ozymandias episode.
Oh.
Ah.
Did not know that. Okay.
So the poetry I like, it has to resonate. And when I write poetry, I try and do the same, you know.
But that's so difficult, because if you think of like yes, we've named a few poems where both of us could finish the other half of the line. Like, just throwing it out there, one of my favorite lines of poetry of all time is "Tread softly, for you tread on my dreams." Like, oh, every time I think of that. So
yeah.
but like, that's such a tiny percentage of poetry written worldwide, and
It's the
also,
Olympics nearly of poetry. It's like the golden
yeah,
medal of the 1% of the 1%. And also they're all white men,
I was about to say, yeah.
There you go. So I mean, it's my own fault for not exposing myself more to poetry, but personally, I've drawn away from poetry a lot, even though I've, run up for the Patrick Kavanagh and a few other things. I'll just say that my kind of experience with poetry in Ireland has been, I was runner up for this, as you said, a big award. And I genuinely thought that would be the life-changing thing. I genuinely thought, because the Patrick Kavanagh is for a collection of poems, it's for a collection of 20 poems. So it's for a book, your first chapbook.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay. So I went around to all the publishers, and it was rejected from all of them. No one wanted to publish it. So I got individual poems.
Even though it was the runner-up for the award.
Yeah. And then
Wow.
I took poems from it, went around to all the magazines. You can list them all, the real literary ones, smaller ones. And it was very hard that they were all rejected too. There was something very strange going on. Now, I even got like my cover letter, critiqued by, other writers that I knew, and it wasn't that I was like posting my underwear to them with the poetry submission or anything, nothing like that. It was literally like, hi, I won this thing, please publish me, thanks. No, I did get like some nods. I was, say, the Cork Poetry Festival, I was named an emerging poet there and all the rest, like, but in terms of publishing the poetry, none of that kind of came through. And there's no one you can go to in Ireland. Like, imagine yourself, you're like, why am I hitting this wall? There's no one you can go to in the world of poetry to ask. And I found it to be incredibly cliquish. And it's something that really pushed me towards indie publishing and kind of the lack of not coming up against that wall of subjection. It was very strange. So it wasn't a good experience, but on the other hand, it was an amazing experience. So
yeah, I know what you mean. So it's kind of like the being recognized for your talent and your efforts and your craft on one hand, but then when it came to the people that decide who does and who doesn't make money, that's where you kind of hit the pitfall.
It was like the lack of community, even because you know yourself, you go to a writers group, who's writing poetry? Do you want to listen to their poetry? Not really on like a Thursday night, you know. So I'm so much more happier with my vampires, my zombies. Like, that's me. That's genuinely who I am. That's really what makes me happy. So I'm more than happy to be like, poetry's lovely. I've been there, done that. It's like the first marriage. You're like, I've been there, done that. We'll do better next time.
Now I know what mistakes not to make.
I literally just got engaged. I shouldn't say anything, but yeah.
So speaking of, you said earlier that you think poetry and science fiction and fantasy are kind of, you didn't say the same thing, but let's just say they're cut from the same cloth. They're two sides of the one coin, whatever. What do you think is the biggest difference? And I'm gonna throw a bit of a curveball at you because this isn't in my list of questions that I did.
Go on.
What's something poetry can do better than novels, and what's something novels do better than poetry?
Novels get that tingly feeling so much quicker. It's like being dropped down into a well. It's like being plunged into the ice water. Whereas a novel can often be a lovely trip down a river and then you go over a waterfall that stays with you for the rest of your life. It's just the delivery method. I think it's a sheer word count thing because essentially they're the same thing to me. Yeah. And kind of they're no real different to write either. You know, I think they should be treated that way because if you're striving for something that will really resonate with people universally and sound good lyrically, you want that in a novel, you want that in a poem, you want that in a short story, you want that in any story, even if your medium isn't words at all, if it's ceramics, you know, you want that resonance and that touch of the universal if you can get there.
Yeah, that's really, really good. So then what was, so I've kind of brought you from childhood all the way up to getting rejected for poetry. So what then made you flip the coin and look at novel writing, and specifically what got you starting to write Rise of One, your first novel, your first published novel, I should assume.
So let's see. I did a HDip in creative writing through Maynooth, which was a year long, and it was a weekend every month. And there I disabused myself of poetry and discovered like the longer forms. Kick it out the door. And so there I developed a YA trilogy, which I would still like to get trad published. Like, I'm quite happy to be a hybrid author. That's no bother. But it was just very interesting. Do you know when you're in a writer's circle and you see other people and like you can't see your own limitations, but you can see theirs? And so many people were married to like this one idea, this one novel, like a memoir of their dead parent or something like that. And it's nearly sad to watch them labor over this one book that they think will change their life. And it was something that kept happening. And even after like the HDip and years, and even geez, today, you see, I'm sure you see so many writers, it's the one universe and that's all they got and all their hopes and dreams are on it. And I was like, look, let's just do something really different. Let's just put the YA trilogy off to the side. Let's take two things. Let's take vampires, let's take zombies. What can we do with that? So I decided to allow myself to play. And I think a lot of writers don't do that. Or if they allow themselves to play, it's in like one page of a notebook. I'm like, let's do 5 books. Check it. Let's do it. Let's set a target you can't even see. Let's see what you can do. And that's kind of how I approach a lot of things in life. It's like, is it possible? Don't know. Let's try. Hey.
Is it possible? Don't know, but I'm going to do 5 of them.
Hey. But the lessons you learn along the way.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, it's like what I want to do, like even after Blood Brute, the series is called Blood Brute. When that's finished, I'm like, okay, let's take The Witcher and let's take The Mandalorian and let's mash them together in like a sci-fi adventure space trilogy. But I'm like, girl, you gotta slow down. Let's write these 5 first. Calm down.
Yeah. One step at a time. And actually, that's one thing I really wanted to talk to you in particular about, because when I'm looking for people to have on the podcast, like my mission statement, I kind of have 2. For the public, it's to find really interesting life stories, and then for me, it's I want to find people that I can learn from to become a better writer. And the one thing from you that I'm like thinking I could learn from is planning on writing a series before you've even written one book, because I assume, because to look at it, I mean, for those who don't know, I'll just kind of blaze through your work. So you have 2 free short stories that are out for people to kind of as a reader magnet, that we call it in the industry.
Well done.
Then your first book came out so this is
December.
February. So your first book came out just before Christmas. Your second book's coming out this summer. Third is coming out this winter. Fourth, summer. Fifth, winter. So in a little over 2 years, you're planning on releasing 5 books, and it seems like you're on track. So I can't even finish the question. How?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, and I'm not going to be smart about this, because I think this is a very important lesson, and I've kind of been there around people who haven't learned this lesson. You have to plan. And when writers hear this, no, I'm a pantser. No, I cannot has do. No, it will kill my creativity. And that's not even me being over dramatic. That's what you get like a war dance from people who you have to plan. You can't just like turn up at a page and go, okay, so something happens here, book 1, page 1. That has to resonate last page, book 5. You're gonna have to plan. And then from there, you're like, okay, girl, I know I need to plan. Now what? So I looked into different outlining methods. And first of all, no, I'll step back there. I opened a spreadsheet, which is my answer to everything in life. You got to do something, open a spreadsheet.
Do you want to know something funny? Data. I interviewed children's author Eve MacDonald, or MacDonald. She'll kill me for saying Donald. And she is also a big fan of the spreadsheet. So that must be an Eve. If you're a writer whose name is Eve, you're a big fan of spreadsheets.
I'm gonna get that URL now. www.evespreadsheetwriters.com. Join the club. We're great fun.
Well, out of the 2 of you you've met so far.
Hey. But yeah, no, a spreadsheet. So it was literally like, do you know the way you'd plan out nearly an essay in school? It's like, okay, you have the setup, you have the middle bit, and you have the ending. And then you write a book based on your little spreadsheet, and you go, oh no, book is something very different. A series is something very different. So I looked up.
If I can just jump in, because that's something that personally I'm trying to wrap my head around. Because when you look up writing a series, planning a series online, there's very little really, unless you scroll to the 75th page on Google and there's gold there. But I mean, who does that? So like, because there's a lot of planning your book and structuring your book, and I have one book out that I am hoping to turn into a quadrology, a 4-book series. Yeah, 4-book series. And I'm like, because I put so much into my first book, and any little idea I had, I'm like, it's going in. It's really, I'm not holding back. And now I'm like, oh no,
is empty now.
Yeah. So how do you plan a series versus a book?
I'm glad you asked. So there's 2 answers, there's 2 parts to that answer. Part 1 is find the outlining method that works for you for your next book. Don't, like, if spreadsheets work for book 1 and then you realize they don't work, change it. You can change your outlining methods. They're not set in stone. I looked up, people are going to cringe, people are going to turn off the podcast. It's Save the Cat. Okay. Save the Cat will break your story into 15 scenes.
Mhm.
And then it will kind of massage that out into 40 scenes. 40 scenes is your book. And if you can swallow that, which seems to be a very hard pill for some writers, if you can swallow a framework, you'll be fine. So that's what I'm doing for book 2.
Okay.
The second part of that question, of that answer, is resonance. So all the stuff you dumped into book 1.
Mm.
So, for example, in book 1, there's a tomcat. In book 2, people are going to remember the tomcat. People are going to hate the stupid cat. God, what was he at? People are going to, they are going to have reactions to stuff you put in book 1. Even if there's no bloody cat in book 2, 3, or 4, there's no cat until book 5. The cat existed. It will affect your readers, your characters throughout, I believe. So even things like if someone has a gammy knee, maybe in book 3 they get a new walking stick. It's that constant referencing back and pulling out and letting it spread out. I think what I think separates, say, a more amateur writer from a more professional writer is an amateur lets out new stuff constantly, like a stream, out. But it takes a real professional to pick back over that and go, oh, I can expand here, over here, and take this bit here, over here. Oh, and that actually rolls into the plot over there. Oh, okay. I think allow yourself to do that. I think too many people want to just, I see it, you see it on Twitter too. People posting their word counts. Oh, I got 5,000 words today, done. I'm like, yeah, but how many of those are going to stay in your book though? Seriously? You're not going to edit that? Oh, okay. Yeah. I think allow yourself to change. And as you get older, I'm very old now, I'm 37. You have to allow yourself to, you have to allow yourself to change and be creative. Sounds like the worst advice ever, but I don't know. I think people, as I've said before, get too married to one idea of how things should be. And I've started outlining this way. You have to be so flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
And that's all we have time for.
Hey, later, folks.
No, I think you're onto something, because, like, so my first novel, and I always say my first novel. I don't say my book, because if I say my book, it sounds like I'm done. So I always say first novel, because it's like,
stop. No way.
Yeah. So with my first novel, I planned using one method, and it worked amazingly. I really could get into the flow. And then I sent the book off to my editor, who did a fantastic job. Amazing.
Don't you love editors?
Oh, they're the best. They're amazing.
Yeah.
But then I found this new software for planning. I'm not going to mention it by name, but if they want me to, they can get in touch and I can do a sponsorship deal. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'll just see what it's like. I was experimenting, and I just plotted out my first book in that again, just to see how the software worked. And then I was like, oh no. And I realized I had 8 chapters, all of them happening at night. And for anyone outside of Ireland, they're not going to twig this. They happened on Stephen's Green, right? Outside the GPO, Donegal.
In what, 1914, 1916?
And it was all supposed to be in one night. And I was like,
oh
God.
In one night?
Yeah. So it was through planning a different method, I realized there was this huge plot hole that I didn't separate by the days, because there's literally one chapter ended with him and he got onto the bus and got away from the bad guys. And then the next one, he stepped off the bus and ran to his house. And it's just like, no, I have to have a thing. So even that, like planning your book in a different way, and you'd be surprised mistakes that professionals didn't catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's frightening, because I had that literal thing happen. I was very lucky enough to win a mentorship through Words Ireland and the Arts Council. Mine was with Oisin McCann, amazing writer. I think it's 20,000 AD or Judge Dredd, one of those as well.
Yeah.
And he took my lovely little YA trilogy, page 1. He's like, why is this if not this? Exact same with you, like the one bus trip for the whole night to all the locations. And you just go, oh, it's the most humbling experience. And it's wonderful, because the next time you go to write something, you're like,
yeah,
keep it in check. Keep it in check. Yeah, watch yourself as you tell stories.
It's kind of like what you're saying about the people that were in the H dip with you, that like they were so zeroed in they couldn't see the forest for the trees. that kind of thing.
Somewhere, yeah. It depends obviously on the writing project. Like a memoir is going to be a very personal thing
Oh yeah,
versus
yeah,
a story that say you told to your child when they were growing up, and or just something you just want to write out of your head because that's what you want to write. I do think not even just the hate it, but I do think nearly university, that kind of being married to something forcefully is, if you can get that out of you when you're writing, I think you'll have a much nicer time, you know.
yeah.
But like I'm sure I do things that I should really let go of, but Jesus, we're not doing that.
Yeah, like it's a kind of a thing of I can't remember the exact phrase, but I remember someone said it to me, and it was along the lines of, the hardest person to give advice to is yourself. Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
can I can sit up here and I can preach and I can tell every author
In the teacher's
anything,
voice and
anything.
everything.
Oh, use the finger wag that I learned in St.
Oh,
Pat's,
yeah.
like all that kind of stuff. But then I can't see I'm making the same mistakes. It's one of those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
I want to move on a little bit. I want to stick with series and writing.
Hmm.
I recently listened to, like, literally the day I prepared for this interview, I listened to a different podcast, and they had someone on about writing series, and I was like, oh, cool. And they explained, the guests in that podcast explained the concept of a character arc series versus a flat arc series. So I'll just explain what they mean with that, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Character arc series is like your series, Blood Brute, where there is a beginning, there is a middle, there is an end. It might not necessarily be 3 books, it might be 5, it might be 12, but there is an end in sight. And then a flat arc series is the main character doesn't change that much. It's like Poirot, or it's like Goosebumps. Like it's just, it's just each book is kind of its own thing. It might have the same characters, but that's it. So why did you write a character arc series where you do have an end in sight? And what do you think is the benefit of a character arc versus a flat arc series?
Hmm. And that's something I actually sat down to research deliberately before I started Blood Brute, because I saw a great video on how Back to the Future is a great example of a flat, yeah, character arc. And I wanted a character who has faults, say that I have, or, in terms of, as we were literally just talking about, you can't see your own faults.
Mm.
So in book one, I wanted a character where maybe not even the reader can see his faults. You think, oh, he's just surviving, he's doing his best, he's trying. But as things unravel over 2, 3, 4, and 5, I really wanted that arc of people coming up to him and going, hey, that thing from book one, that actually wasn't healthy for you or for us. And what you did here, actually, that wasn't right. And then I think I've experienced this a lot in life. I don't know if you have, where you think you're talking great or you're doing something good, but yet people will come back to you later and be like, actually, that was awful. Or actually, you shouldn't have done that. And you're like, no, I had the best of intentions. And I really wanted that. I really wanted that panic and that kind of someone holding up the mirror to a character who thinks, believes, knows, sees themselves as a great leader, a great protector. Because book one starts, say, in the relative safety of the vampire coven living in safety. They're protected by walls, they're protected by magic, and their main problem is that they've just been alive too long together. And it's that kind of, as we all know now in lockdown, it's that kind of breathlessness that comes with having people around you all the time and you can't move without looking at people. So under those circumstances, anyone could be fine. You'd be like, you give them a break, you cut the slack. But I really wanted that arc over the 5 books of, that was wrong, you should have done it differently. And then the reaction to that, and whether the main character, Rise, the vampire, has grown enough, suffered enough to take that on board and change, or what will you do?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. I agree. I do think a character arc series is, it's just, you can do so much more. And it's like you were saying earlier about, some writers give themselves a page to play with, but like a character arc series gives you, I don't want to say unlimited, but it's unlimited in the sense of a series can be 2, 3, 12 books. It doesn't matter. But if there's going to be an ending, you have this limited space to play, but but like my mom's going to call me in for dinner, so I have to stop playing at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, like I know, like, and what I really like in this series is what I'm kind of messing around with. The location changes differently each book. So book one is in Owl Court, which is like this red brick little homestead, a small holding with chickens and pigs, and it's all very pastoral, very Shire. Book 2 will actually take place in Ireland, and it'll be something completely different. Yay! And then book 3 will be somewhere else. Same, in fact. So
Very
even
good.
location to change. Yeah, I think even that's an arc in of itself.
Yeah, it's a literal journey.
Yeah. Can you go back home? Will you be the same person? No. Will home be the same person? No.
No.
Can you deal with that? Hopefully.
Can you deal with that? Tough. You have to.
You gotta. Yeah.
So this is one thing that I struggled with. I know we're both fans of Joanna Penn. That's actually the podcast I mentioned earlier that I was.
Oh, she's brilliant. Yeah.
Brilliant. She's anyone who's an indie author listening to this or thinking about becoming an indie author, listen to Joanna Penn and do what she tells you to do. Because I didn't.
Oh no, you didn't listen to Joanna.
I didn't listen to Joanna. And if I ever have her on this podcast, that's the first thing I'm going to say. I'm going to say, I'm so sorry. But
what did you do, Conor?
I published the book when it wasn't ready, right? So I just didn't build up an email list to have people there that were hungry for the book. I didn't have I had 4 beta readers, 2 of whom read the book and got back to me. Like all those small things in the prep, because I was so proud and excited and giddy and ready to publish, that when the book was ready and I got the cover and I had done my own version of the copy edit, not a good job, I was like, screw it, and I just released it into the world. So
oh no,
how did you not do that? Because I assume you have a certain amount of book 2, 3, 4, and 5 ready to an extent. So like, how, when you had book 1 done, like, did you go straight onto book 2, or did you release it and then go on to, like, how did you not just hit publish when you were ready? How did you wait?
I'll tell you, one of the interesting things about being an indie author is, as we talked about before, reader magnets. So before Rise of One, the first book, was published, I have 2 short story prequels. One is about 3,000 words. The other one is about 13,000 words. 13. They need covers. 13.
Wow.
So it's quite a long short story. So they needed covers, which fall in with the series. So your kind of publication of your first book is my publication of my 2 prequels, because I'm sure you know this, you publish and then the world keeps turning, Conor. The
Unfortunately.
world doesn't stop. And it's not that no one cares, but there is that moment where you sit at your desk and go, oh, I'm published. Now what?
Now what?
And the birds are still singing outside and the postman is still delivering. And you're just like, oh, okay. I'm sure you've had that moment where you realize it's like, it's shocking. You're like, oh, I did something. Yeah. But like, I think that saved my skin, was the reader magnets. And that's where I learned that lesson, was on the reader magnets. Because, yeah, I unpublished them. I went back to the drawing board on some of them, enlisted maybe an editor, beta reader, and just spit and polished up 1 or 2 things, and then released it again. So by the time it came to release Rise of One, I was well disabused of that. That wasn't the concern. That was in the bin with poetry.
You had learned your lesson.
Oh, it's such a sore lesson. But let me tell you something, like, publishing that first book is the greatest lesson of your life. Oh, because there's elements when you hit publish, you're like, I am never doing A, B, C ever again. And you're such a better writer. And you
I went all the way to J. I was like, I'm not doing A, B, C, D, E, F.
The whole alphabet. Milished, as they say here. Milished. So yeah, and I think as you write book 2, I feel this panic of, no, I'm such a better writer, guys, than book 1. You have no idea, guys. Dude, I'm so much better. And I turn into like someone from Point Break. Dude, you don't even know how good book 2 is. Yeah. So what I love is the lessons that you learn as you go along. I mean, I just want to say something, and this isn't the question in the podcast, but it's just a little lump of wisdom I'd like to drop in.
Do, please. Yeah.
And I only discovered it last week, and it's quite life-changing, because I browse Reddit a lot. And there's so much shite on Reddit. But every now and then there's this one little nugget that changes your life, and you're like, oh, everyone needs to know this. So all the happiness and hope and joy that you feel in life around your book being published, like as you were saying, that giddiness, you just want to hit publish, all the joy, take that and put that onto the process of every day. So when you sit down every day, that's your joy.
Yeah.
Getting published is not your joy. It's going to happen and you can enjoy it. But your happiness cannot depend on being published. It depends on the process, the daily habit. And I think to get to the end of 5 books plus 2 shorts, that's what's keeping me going. It's not talent. It's not some kind of mad determination. It's just the movement of happiness, which sounds very airy fairy, and that's about as creative as I get.
It does, but it doesn't. Like I get what you mean too. And just when you mentioned lumps of wisdom you found and Reddit that changed your life, I had one that changed my life several years.
Tell me.
And I still say it to everybody: is if you're having a conversation, pay attention to what you're doing. Are you waiting for your turn to speak, or are you trying to learn about the other person? And I think because a few people have said that they enjoy this podcast, and I think that's one thing I really try to bring into this when I'm interviewing. It's like, I'm not waiting for my turn to speak. I'm trying to learn about Eve, and I think that's just something applied to everywhere in life. There you go. A little bit of 2 great nuggets of wisdom via Reddit.
We're so wise. The wisdom of Reddit.com. And I'm aware that as like an interviewee, I'm like, oh, there's going to be another question asked and I better listen. So I'm like, I can't totally take your advice right now, Conor, but I will.
No, but that's fine. But this is it's supposed to be like that for the interview. It's fine. So speaking of
it's an interview.
Yeah. So I just want to take a little bit of a turn and get away from writing for a second. So we all know 2020 was, and look,
what even was it like?
To be honest, 2021 so far hasn't been all that great either.
No, actually.
You seemed to have had a roller coaster of a 2020. I mean, which I haven't said it to you in person. I didn't even say it to you before we recorded. Congratulations, you got engaged. Also, congratulations, you published a book. But then also, you unfortunately lost your mother. So like that, I can't imagine how hard it has been having to go through all that. But what do you think has the loss of your mother, has that affected your writing at all? Like, do you wish, obviously you wish she was there when you published the Rise of One, but like, is there anything kind of about that you'd like to speak to?
I think I'll just speak to say 2020 as a whole, because the literal dedication inside Rise of One is, this book is dedicated to 2020. What a year. That's the literal dedication. So 2020 started out, I think, even in January with the loss of my mum. And then coronavirus happened, let's just say. And then lockdown, and I worked from home full time. And then sometime in August, I damaged my throat. I pulled some of the cartilage, and that takes a very, very long time to heal. So that meant for my book launch, I couldn't do this. I couldn't do launches. I couldn't do Zoom events. I couldn't do anything. And even we had other plans and we couldn't do any of that. So there was that. And then, I was publishing a book, my first indie book. And then right at the end of the year, my significant other popped the question. I think from when I was young up until about 30, the kind of, say, childhood I've had and the environment which I've raised, if I've gotten through that, 2020 is nothing. I think a tough childhood will temper you in a way that whatever comes, you just kind of go, okay, well, I'll just set a timer here for 30 minutes. I'm just going to write. What's next? Oh, the world is ending. Okay, I'm going to put that aside for now. What else can we do? And it's just, I don't know if you ever watched The West Wing, but Jed Bartlett, the president, Martin Sheen.
Martin.
His catchphrase is, what's next? And that, I actually loved that show growing up, and that show kind of really helped me a lot growing up, to see professional people working in a professional environment. And I kind of model myself off CJ Craig because she's 6 foot and so am I. Anyway, but it can be, it's just like, what's next? You've gone through the trauma, you've gone through the damage, and I've shown that just little and often will get you to your goals. Don't panic. Don't be crying. You'll be all right. Just set a timer for like 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. What's your goal? A 5-book series. Okay, let's just write for 30 minutes. And then maybe we'll do that again later, or maybe we'll do it tomorrow. It's that kind of step by step. I just think, I know 2020 has been impossible for people, like it genuinely has, but there is that element of when you come from a background that's not sunshine and roses, where it's like, actually I can get through this, it'd be grand. And then if you can help those around you get through that by being like, hey, I published a book this year, hey, you know, got a good relationship this year, we can all do this. And just being there for other people, I think that's so important. Like for the friends who, you know, it's probably the first time that they haven't been able to go home to mommy and daddy, that kind of thing, even though they're like our age and grown and whatnot.
I think though that's just a very Irish thing. We're very like, you know, we both are not from Dublin but living in Dublin.
Yeah.
And I mean there are people our age that I work with that go home to mammy, if not every weekend, every other weekend, or you know. And it's
a cultural thing. You should probably explain it to your listeners.
It really is.
I can't.
That's what I was trying to say. It's an Irish thing. It like to anyone in the States or the UK or anywhere other than Ireland. Like it's just a very cultural thing. And for example, I'm going to say if Eve said, "Oh, I'm going to go home," I might ask her, "Are you going home or are you going home?" And she knows exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's just a very cultural thing. And I do think that's one thing a lot of Irish people found hard about lockdown, was not being able to return to home to where you grew up. And you know, that has been tough on a lot of people,
because it was this perfect storm of, again, in Ireland and Dublin we've got this terrible housing situation, where people are stuck in bed sits, flat shares, room shares, and you can't move out because there's nowhere to move to. And you can't afford anywhere to move to. And I know so many people who are stuck in terrible situations with housemates who say aren't wearing their masks or washing their hands, that kind of thing. And it's been a shock to many people like that, I think, you know.
But you know what? Also in 2020 had good things, and we have to focus on them during bad times.
Yeah.
You released a book.
Yeah.
I started a podcast. All these wonderful
Good
things.
man yourself. And like I'm like, so kind of tell me more of this podcast. How did you?
You're on it.
That's not the interview. That's not the interview, girl. Yeah,
that's exactly what happened with our mutual friend Stephen Blackfield.
Great.
He was at the end of the interview. He goes, "Can we go again? Because I want to ask you all those questions again."
Stephen, it's not how it works, Stephen. But yeah, I mean, just kind of on that note, like as an indie author, you do have to build a platform outside of publishing books. Say I'm a wide author, but like publishing books on Amazon, you can't just do that and expect sales. Obviously there's other elements of advertising you can do, but I think it is important for doing your podcast. It's important to do something else. I've been thinking of something kind of on YouTube for a while now, and I'm kind of gearing up for that. But I work a full-time job and it's very detail orientated, and I have to, like, it's kind of a job where mistakes
are huge,
not to big it up or anything, but you know, you just have to be concentrated and obviously give your due respect to your job, because that comes first. And then there's writing, and then there's marketing, and then there's all this with being a human.
And then there's admin, and then there's
and then you're like, I have a fiance.
You've a wedding to plan.
I know. Can we just like stop this podcast and talk? Okay, so listeners, at the minute in Ireland, you can only have 6 at your wedding. That includes the couple and the solemnizer. So there's 3 other people you can invite, and no one can travel outside of a 5K radius.
So you have to pick 3 people that are within your 5K radius of your venue.
I'm like, what do I feed these people? None of our restaurants are open. I do this dish where I know this has nothing to do with writing. I'm sorry, but I'm going to give a good recipe, right? So you get a chicken. I'm not even joking.
And
get a chicken, and literally, because the instruction on the recipe is, my voice is going. The instruction is cover it in salt, covered in so much salt that you feel embarrassed, and you put it in the oven for an hour. And what happens is it forms this salt crust around the chicken, and it boils inside this the chicken inside the salt crust. It sounds crazy, but if lockdown don't lift, that's what my fucking wedding guests are getting. LOL. Life is fine. 2021. Oh.
Yeah. That's almost as bananas as my father's way of cooking our Christmas ham, which is boiling it in Coca-Cola.
I do that in Coca-Cola. Yes, it's really genius.
Nice. It's really nice, and you wouldn't think it is, but it's really nice. Anyway, back to you.
Not chickens.
This is
Okay.
easily the most off the tracks my interview has ever gone, and I'm loving it.
Oh, Jesus,
So
Colin, I'm so sorry.
don't be, it's grand. So anyway, this has been the beginning segment, and as I said to you at the
Oh, is it just the beginning?
recording, this is the beginning. No, the middle and the to be continued is very, very short.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk very fast.
So the middle of your story as being a storyteller is you as a writer now and today. So my first question is usually, what are you writing at the minute? But I know it's book 2 of the series. So what is the biggest, just narrow it down to one, what is the biggest lesson you've learned having done book 1 and then facing into book 2? What's the one thing you're like, okay, I made that mistake, I'm not going to do it this time?
Plan better.
Okay.
We've gone over planning already. I'm like, it's plan better, because
more planning.
You can change your outlining method. Try something new. Try something that you hate. I ridiculed Save the Cat for so long. It seemed so gimmicky to me. It seemed so stupid to me. But then you have to shut up and sit down and try it. And then you're like, oh, it's actually really good. LOL, who knew?
So actually, if you
popular. Hey, look, if you read book 2, you can actually just like get the Save the Cat. You can point out, oh, there's the catalyst there now, and there's the double bump. They're now going into Act 2. Jesus.
Here we go. So, how far into, with books 3 to 5, how far into the planning process of them are you? Like, do you know? I mean, I'm sure you know how book 5 ends, for example. Like, but do you know how much of the ins and outs do you know of 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, they're all there pretty much. I could say, oh, book 3 opens with blah and ABCD happens, and then that's the end, which leads into book 4. So my outlines now have become quite detailed. They're in a lovely colorful spreadsheet. They're gorgeous. So I do that for 3, 4, and 5. Like you could say, hey, what happens in the middle of book 3? And I'd be like, oh, that's the scene where, and then I could tell you. So
don't spoilers, but yes. Well, that's good. That's really interesting, because that's one thing as I said, I'm trying to figure out about my own is, do I need to know the ins and outs of 3, 4 or whatever?
No. I genuinely think, and it unfolds as you write, which I was shiting on the pantser people earlier, but a lot of your outlining will come as you write. But you do need, okay, very quickly.
No, it's fine.
I'm a knitter, I'm a crochet, and I make Irish lace as well as a hobby sometimes.
What don't you do?
I'm one of those.
Yeah.
By the way, I make Irish lace,
Hi.
Right. If everyone hasn't turned off, then the moral of this stupid story is that, okay, there is a pattern. I'm so sorry, Conor. There is a pattern, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're laughing at me. You're putting me out here. Desperate interview altogether. So distracting.
No, keep going. I'm the editor as well, so if you go on too much, I can.
How dare you? I'm offended. So you look at a piece of Irish lace and you think, oh, that's gorgeous. No one can tell me that's not either creative or beautiful or elegant. Yet behind it is a set of very rigid patterns.
Mathematical, even.
Mathematically patterns. And it was such a revelation to little old me to be like, you can pattern behind your work and still have it be the most creative, outlandish, new age, cutting edge thing you can imagine. You can have that deep methodology, that deep pattern behind it, and it's still creative, it's still beautiful. People think planning will kill creativity. It's the opposite. It'll set you free. It's the pegboard on which you fly.
Yeah. No, I would agree.
Metaphor there.
I'm currently planning my second book in my series, and I'm using, which I'm sure you would have heard of it if you were looking at planning, John Truby's The Art of Story, or The Anatomy of Storytelling.
The Anatomy of Story, yeah.
Yes, and same as that, I used to think, like, I am a planner, but I used to think following a step-by-step guide was ridiculous, and it's not, because the creativity that pantsers feel when they're there writing on the page, because you're a planner too, we get that in the planning stage. And what's great is when the planning is done, if you've done it well, you write the book like that. Like it just flows out of you so quickly. It's
fill in the blanks, and not in that kind of really dull way. It's nearly like ad-libs.
No, you created the bits between the blanks. So filling in the blanks is just you finishing your work, really.
Oh, brilliant. Bye. Put that one on a t-shirt.
I will. So what, I mean, I feel everyone's going to say publishing their first book usually. And if it is, that's okay. But what has your proudest moment as a writer been so far, I should say?
It's that I get to write every day.
That's great.
It's that I haven't given up, because so many have. And it's not like, oh, I've done blah. It's just like, no, every day I get to sit down, and I do set a timer for 30 minutes. And some days all I get done is 30 minutes. And some days 29 of those minutes is looking at the window. As I said to my friends the other day, like a glitched sim, you know. But I make the time every day. And that's my proudest thing. No matter what's happening, you try.
I think that's a really important thing, though. Like it's funny. It's right every day, but right every day without putting pressure on yourself and without beating yourself up if you can't or couldn't, or if you're having a really bad day and you need to take a break.
Yeah.
That's fine. So yeah.
Oh, if you need to just sit there for 30 minutes, off you go. That will be nice. That will do you more good than anything. It genuinely will. And it's not even writing every day. It's just give yourself 30 minutes every day. Write or not, but do clear that little tiny space to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So my next section and the final section of every episode of Story of a Storyteller is the to be continued. And I always ask the exact same question to everybody because it's really nice to hear the different answers. So when this interview is over and we've said our good lucks and goodbyes and we've hit stop and all that, what's the first thing you're going to do?
Get a cup of tea. That's what I'm doing. Cup of tea.
She's Irish, folks.
Hey.
And then what are your goals as a writer? I mean, I know you've kind of already said this, but I know finished the Blood Brute series. You have that YA trilogy. You know, but other than that, what are your kind of big, huge aspirations?
Oh God. I would like to learn Irish to the level where I can translate all this into Irish. Bhualam Gaelga Fowlam on Lower. See, the great thing is, I don't know, vampires and zombies, is there an Irish equivalent? I'm sure there must be, but if there isn't, I'm just going with vampires, all the zombies.
Tashi Kakalor, yeah. No,
Tashi. Hey. Are you an Irish teacher?
Well, I'm a primary teacher, so we have to teach.
You'd have to Gaelga. Okay.
I love that. You just did a perfect little bit of direct translation, because you said you have the Gaelga, whereas anyone who doesn't do Irish, they'll say, oh, you speak Irish. But in Irish, direct in the language Irish, you have a language. So tá Gaelga agan, tá Béarla agan. So tá Gaelga. So b'what that Gaelga.
Oh.
Well, that's admirable. And I'll give you.
I mean, it's just. No. Do you know, like when you just dug a hole for yourself? You're like, no one come out in the hole with me. No one needs to come into this hole. No.
Don't do it.
But I just think if growing up, if they'd been Irish science fiction with vampires and zombies and all that stuff, not a retelling of Irish myth and legend, which as Irish writers we see constantly. It's just bizarre how people keep picking on our monomyths, our cultural myths. And I'm like, but you can take gay vampires and put them like zombies. Why won't you do that instead? That's so sweet.
Why not?
Who?
You'll get there. That's it. So basically, your big goal is write all the books and then get good enough at Irish that you can translate those books into Irish.
Yeah, and I think I just like to be good at Irish just because, my degree is in early Irish and I really enjoyed that. And I saw the value of people in Irish don't value Irish. People in Ireland don't value Irish. It's a weird class marker thing now rather than a language. And I think I would love for anything I write I could get that in Irish too. And that's just like a little kind of, I'd like that to happen.
That's cool. That's really, really cool. So we're wrapping up now and I only have the 2 questions left. So the first is, and there'll be links and all this, which you're about to hear in descriptions and all those kind of places. So where can people find you and all your stuff and everything online? Excellent.
I am at dixonreuel.com and Reuel is spelled R-E-U-E-L. And I'm most active on Twitter. That's probably the best platform. That's where you'll get all the memes, basically, that I retweet all the memes. You want some memes? Yeah, you want some memes, just come along on Twitter. So yeah, on the website you'll get the links to the 2 free prequels. You get the links to Rise of One, which is paperback and ebook, and you can also get a link to pre-order book 2, which is Fall of 2. And on the website, and even on my Twitter and Instagram and all the rest, you can see the beautiful covers by my illustrator, which I feel are stunning.
I'm so sorry. I actually really wanted to speak about them because they're amazing.
They're so good. Nothing to do with me at all. I know. It was just like, I found this amazing. So, okay. So any author listening to this, you need to find the website Reedsy, Reedsy, which is nearly like a phone book for writing professionals. And from there, I found editors, I found publicists, I found, but the best one I found is the illustrator, Natasha McKenzie. She's on Twitter as well and on Instagram. And I literally just said, look, I don't know exactly what I need for this series, but here's my Pinterest board. Off you go. And she sent me back just this one eye. And that's, you'll see on the cover of all the books, it's the eye motif, which is actually a very interesting plot point throughout the book, in that power moves. You know, some people are like, oh, I have great hearing. Oh, my hearing is so good. What happens if you lose that? Or what if it jumps to a different sense? So the eye is quite interesting throughout Bloodroot. And she picked up on that instantly. And she's like, bam, bam, bam. And each cover, in each iris, there's a different plot, twisty thing. So book 2 takes place in a tower. And of course, in the iris of book 2, there's this amazing chess piece. Is the rook in the eye? And I'm like, Natasha, you just hit the right spot. You know what you're doing. And she'll come at me with like colors. Like the book 2 color is yellow. And I'm like, yellow? For a heart? What? And I look, I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, you're right, Natasha. I'm sorry. Carry on.
You're the professional.
You're the professional. Yeah. So I know it's hard for indie authors to hire professionals. I know that is, because that
costs money. If you want to appear professional, you have to. If you want to be a professional, you have to hire professional editors. You have to hire professional cover designers. You have to not make the same mistake Conor made and do the copy editing yourself. You have to hire a copy editor. No, you're dead right.
Yeah, because I literally had that conversation on the self-publishing Reddit today. I was like, I mentioned something about the Wishing Shelf Book Awards, that Rise of One being a finalist, and I said, I just mentioned that, and I said, it's important to focus on writing sometimes rather than all the other stuff that comes with it. And people in the comments were like, oh, but you have to pay to enter the contest. And I'm like, that's the cost of doing business. If you want to be an indie author, that's the cost of doing business. And that seems so alien to people.
Yeah.
Well, Reddit anyway.
Yeah. So my final question, Eve.
Yes,
tonight, very, very simple. What was the most recent book you read, or the last book you read?
The last book I finished was Dune Messiah, because this year I'm just rereading things. I'm going back to kind of the sci-fi greats. I'm going back to Arrival, and I'm going back to the Dark Tower series, and I'm going back to, and even outside of that, the books that I love. Like there's this author, Mary Reynolds, and her kind of retelling of ancient Greek and Roman times. So her series on Alexander the Great, for example, is from the perspective of his male concubine, who was Darius the Greatest concubine. And it's a fascinating study in unreliable narrating. Yes. So this year's all about a revisit for books. And the short answer to your question is Dune Messiah. the long answer is, I'll tell you what happened, right? On January 1st, it's like, I'm going to reread everything this year. I'm going to brush up on reread. No new books this year. I started off with Dune, and it's like this big. It's like War and Peace. I was like, oh.
What did I do?
I know. And you're like 20 chapters in, you're like, they're still in the Shaggin Desert. Oh my fucking God. But no, it's fine. And then
20 pages in, and you're still like in the opening song if it was a musical.
There you go, Tolkien. But yeah. And now I'm in the middle of The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, and that book saved me. That book,
Eve, thank you so much for
Conor,
for being on the show, for being such a good guest, and for dropping so many pearls of wisdom and also cracking so many jokes.
Hey,
A nice mix.
we're just going to keep trying.
That's all we can ever do.
Okay. Timer for 30 minutes. Keep trying.
Thanks. See you.
Thank you, Conor. Take care.